Good morning guys, happy Thursday. So I was about to head to CrossFit this morning. I'm not quite sure what session is today, but then straight after I think I will do a handstand session, and then I've also got a upper body session to do. So that is the plan for training today. We've got a couple of client bits that we need to do, a little bit of filming and editing that we need to do, all the usual, and then I will try and get an hour of sun later. I've got a dinner with some people from CrossFit, which would be nice this evening. So I'm going to get a move on because I'm looking for my camera charger because it's going to run out. So I'll try and film some of my workout, but that's what I need. See you later. Today I thought I would take you through my handstand contortion session. So it was predominantly backbend based. This was actually after I'd just done a CrossFit workout and then a little workout on the bike as well. So with the CrossFit we did a lot of abs at the beginning, and then the WOD today was running, handstand press-ups, dumbbell hang cleans, and what was the other thing? Can't even remember. Oh, air squats. So to be honest, it was quite a nice workout for me because it was predominantly bodyweight exercises, and obviously I do a lot of kind of like functional strength bodyweight exercises, so yeah, it wasn't too, well, I mean, it's always challenging because I push myself really hard, but it was a good workout for me. After that, as I said, I moved on to my handstand contortion session. So I was working mainly up to Mexican transitions, which is at the end of the session. But to begin with, I was focusing on doing kind of more extreme back bend training, just get my back a little bit more flexible, because to be honest, I haven't really done that much back bend work over the last couple of months. I've done the odd session here and there, but I haven't kind of really focused most of my energy on that area. So what I normally do when I do my handstand sessions is I normally pick a particular skill which I'll do kind of like predominantly throughout the session, and then around the session I'll do stretching. Obviously if it's like a back bend session or a splits kind of specific session, then I'll focus a bit more on those particular areas. But in between, because I like to kind of keep moving the whole time, don't like to have too much of a rest period, I always do something which is kind of either like a handstand flow or a bit of mobility or like core work. And I find that works really, really well. I also kind of do that style with my clients as well, just so if I've got a client and, you know, they want an hour session, we can get the most out of a session, being productive with the main skill, but also making sure that we're working on core and mobility in between, so we don't really waste too much time. So I moved on to leg kickbacks. This is a really good exercise. I find it really works the glutes and also the lower back, and actually more activation than anything. And when you're doing your handstand work, obviously you want to make sure that you are activating the glutes. You're keeping your lower back as stable as possible so you don't end up with injuries, and you do want to build strength up in that area. I've seen so many people before end up with injuries because, you know, they've got an increased amount of mobility but they just haven't focused on strength, and I think that's really where a lot of people do go wrong. So I was stretching my toes as well in between. I do this very often because my toes are actually not naturally particularly flexible, so I do have to focus a lot on them, and I just tend to kind of do a bit of a toe stretch in between handstands, in between mobility. This is a really nice movement I find for thoracic mobility. So you're lowering your glutes down to the floor, obviously you're in an elevated bridge position, and you can really focus on pushing the armpits and the thoracic to the wall behind you. I do really want to actually work on that position, making it into a handstand without the bench. So basically just exactly the same position, but just moving the bench away, and so I can balance with my feet in that position. I think it'd be super cool. Anyway, I was doing some flow work in between. I really enjoy just kind of posturing about in handstands, just kind of getting into a nice flow state. Guess you can call it, you know, a form of yoga if you were doing inversion training, and I'm just flowing through the movements. I normally listen to some of my favourite music when I work out, and I just find it's such a kind of nice thing to do. I'm fully present really in the moment, and I forget about anything else. I'm just doing my handstand flows. So now we're moving a bit more into more back bend work. So I was doing some bridges with legs in the air. I was moving through like a one-footed ring. I was doing just one leg kind of stag handstand. And these all obviously work the back before I go into the more extreme kind of Mexican and ring work. So it's really important, obviously, when you're doing your back bend training to make sure that your back is fully warmed up. Luckily, in this kind of environment in Mexico, it is extremely hot, especially in this gym, and especially after doing a workout prior to my handstand flexibility workout. So already, like, I don't have to do too much warming up, and something about me is I'm naturally incredibly flexible. So to be honest, I could not warm up at all, which I would never advise to anyone, so don't take that advice. But I would still be very, very flexible. But yeah, this is again a really nice exercise working on not just back mobility, the previous exercise, also working on that split position as well. Then we're moving into the Mexican work. As I said, I haven't really focused on back bends that much recently, so I was a little bit tight actually at the beginning. I think where I've done so much strength training and not done the back bends alongside, I was just taking a bit more time than usual to actually get into that position. So then we're moving on to some one-legged handstand ring stags. And again, just working on that movement flow, one of my main priorities at the moment, just trying to keep everything fluid, and, you know, going through those different skill-based movements, which I think are really nice to develop. So now we're getting into the main work, we're getting into the Mexicans, the rings, doing the more skill-based work. Because we've done obviously the back bend mobility. I do continue to do the back bend mobility throughout the session, just in the breaks from handstands, give my arms a little bit of time to recover. And I also do some other shapes, and I often do this when, you know, I'm focusing predominantly, as I said, on Mexicans and rings, which is the back bend contortion handstands. But in between, it's nice to actually do some other shapes, just to give, you know, my back a bit of a rest, but keep working on strength as well. So we're doing some more bridges. You can see with each bridge I do throughout this session, it will get a little bit more flexible. That's the kind of aim. So we're kicking back into handstand, going into our bridge position, pushing the armpits to the wall behind us, getting a little bit more flexible with that position, and then we're going into the deeper thoracic stretch, lowering the glutes down to the ground, and bending the knees, and as you can see, that's getting a bit more flexible as well. I also go into some more shoulder specific stretches. So I've got my arms on the bench. It's actually a better position if you drop down to your knees, because otherwise it was too low, and then pushing the armpits down to the ground. Again, working on shoulder mobility, on thoracic mobility, and as I said, they are the two areas which are a little bit tighter for me with my back, although, you know, as you guys know, my back is extremely flexible, and pretty much all areas of my body are, compared to maybe your normal person, but as a contortionist, they're the tighter areas for me. Now we start to go into the Mexican reps, so that's doing multiple repetitions in a row. It's always really important when you're doing your back bend contortion handstands to focus on actually the come out of it, and if you can, focus on getting into a controlled handstand position. That again really builds up that strength, and then when you're able to do that, you know, you can go straight back into your Mexican, straight back into your ring, and you can do, you know, 5 reps in a row. You can start off with just 2 reps in a row, and you can just build up that back mobility, you can build up that skill base. And in between, we're just doing some one-legged bridges, getting a little bit deeper into that stretch again. As I mentioned throughout the session, the goal is to get deeper into the stretch, building up to the main transition, which is that crocodile pullover to Mexican ring. So I usually only do kind of show you clips of my whole training. So today's handstand session was a kind of like 45-minute session, and I do various different, you know, exercises which are flexibility related, obviously in between my handstands, as I've mentioned, and I won't just do, you know, 1 repetition of them, I will do multiple repetitions. So now we're going back into another Mexican ring. We're coming up, and then we're coming out of that position, and we're just going into yogi, just messing around again. I think it's really important with the handstand training to have a bit of fun with it. Obviously you do need some kind of structure to your training for sure, especially if you're a beginner. Like, I would say the more beginner you are with your handstand training, the more structure you need just to focus on those foundations, on perfecting the basics before moving on. But as you do become more advanced, you can, have a bit more time to just play around with things, and I think that's very important. Just experiment with things. You want to keep it fresh, you want to keep it enjoyable, so you have the motivation to train. Whereas sometimes, when you've been doing it a long time, if it's too rigid, you become a little bit demotivated by training. So, always make sure you're enjoying it and also doing things that you like to do within the session. A lot of your handstand training is going to be a case of repetition. So, it's doing hundreds upon hundreds of repetitions over the weeks, the months, the years that makes you a kind of, established handstander. As with anything in life, practice does make perfect. And if you're only going to be putting in an hour a week to your training, you're really not going to see the progress that you want to see, especially if you're coming from a beginner background. Like, in that case, I'm not saying you have to necessarily do an hour in a row. You could do, say, 3 30-minute sessions a week, and that would be really beneficial to you because you're focused predominantly on doing a lot of kind of core conditioning exercises and skill-based work specific to just perfecting a normal handstand, and you'll see a lot of progress because you'll have enough time to recover. Sessions won't be too long, too kind of drawn out, and hopefully you'll feel motivated with, say, a 30-minute session rather than an hour session. This was the main thing I was talking about. So now we're going from our crocodile into our handstand, into our ring, and then from ring we were coming back and I was going through planche back into a crocodile. So planche I do need to work on still, haven't really been focusing on it the last couple of weeks. And what I want to do with this skill is develop it so I can actually do multiple repetitions in a row. So as well as going through my planche on the way down, and that one I didn't make it, I actually want to be going down into crocodile and then coming straight back into another Mexican, into another repetition, going straight back down to crocodile, which is a position kind of closer to the ground, back into another Mexican ring. This means when it comes to kind of competing, I've really focused on perfecting that skill and it'll be a lot easier in my routine. And that was my session today.